good evening.
Evening.
Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Obviously, how are you?
I'm all right. How
Good.
are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Obviously, everyone's just seen the film, and I think enjoyed it. Yeah. So I suppose my first question is, anyone who's written a script or tried to write a script, the dream, the lottery win is to see it actually made into a movie with movie stars and posters everywhere. And that's obviously now happened with you and for you with this film. It's your first major feature that you wrote the screenplay for. So my first question is, how does it feel to go from writing it in wherever you wrote it in a garage at home to actually seeing it on the big screen with Tom Hanks and Emma Thompson?
It's bloody bonkers. I wrote it in a shed at the bottom of my garden in London. And so it's a little bit different to be in Hollywood and driving down La Cienega and seeing huge billboards for it everywhere. Yeah, it's mad. It's absolutely mad. But lovely. But it's been a bit of a crazy roller coaster.
I can imagine. How did you first become involved with Saving Mr. Banks? Where did it start for you?
So an Australian producer called Ian Colley, who's also the producer on this film, made a documentary about P.L. Trevor's life called In the Shadow of Mary Poppins. And P.L. had a really extraordinary life that was enormous. And this is kind of only 2 weeks of it, but she was like weirdly spiritual, and she had lesbian relationships and just all kinds of things. And they hired somebody to write a script about based on that documentary. And I think that happened that script was knocking around for quite a long time and somehow ended up on Alison Owen's desk, who's our British producer. And she felt like there was something in that story to be told that wasn't that story, but kind of showed it to me and was like, what do you think? And told me about everything that had happened behind the scenes of the making of Mary Poppins. And I was like, that's amazing, and we totally have to tell that story. And so she brought me on board, and I wrote it from scratch, and it became what it is that you've just seen. And we just basically took, it was a kind of birth to death biopic, and so we just took that section of it and expanded it into an entire movie. And it's kind of all Alison, really. It was her idea to do it.
And so am I right in thinking that when you were writing this screenplay, at this point, Disney weren't involved in any way?
No, they weren't.
Okay. So did you have any thought to the fact that, at some point, they would be involved, or they would at least have an opinion on,
Do you know what? Really naively and kind of stupidly, I never ever thought about it. I just thought, I love this story, I love these characters, this is something that I want to write and that I want to tell. And it was only when I finished it that I was like, oh shit, like we can't make a movie with Walt Disney in it and all the Poppins songs in it unless it's made by Disney. And as you know, that's a 1 in a million shot for a script to be able to be made by one studio is virtually impossible.
Absolutely.
And so it was I don't know why I hadn't thought about it before.
Probably good that you hadn't.
Yeah, I know. Otherwise I've been going, I have to do this because otherwise they won't like it. So no, actually it was a really good thing to not feel the pressure of anybody on me and just to be able to sit there and write it alone.
So at the point that you'd finished the script and Disney weren't yet involved, there was a bit of a kind of buzz around the script. It was one of those scripts that was in the blacklist, and it was...
It's all because of that man, wherever he is. Where's Franklin?
Franklin, wherever you are, you troublemaker.
Yeah.
So the script appeared on the blacklist, a lot of buzz around it. As again, another most writers aspire to that as well, to write a script that makes it to the blacklist that everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
So how was that experience for you?
Oh my God, the day it got on the blacklist, I was out of my mind. I was so happy because it was something that I had followed and I really respect the scripts that are on the blacklist, and never in a million years did I ever think that I would have one that was on there. The blacklist was an incredibly important part of this process for us, because it really shone a light on the script and helped gain a kind of momentum for it. You know, I think Franklin's really instrumental, and he also, you know, is very, very good friends with the people who are the execs on our film at Disney. So I think it all sort of, everything felt like it all just fell into place kind of naturally with this film, and it was on the blacklist, but also Tendo Ngenda, who's our exec at Disney, had found the script also, and he was like our biggest ally at Disney, and he really pushed this thing forward. It became like, you know, it became his baby as much as it was ours. But blacklist was incredibly important for us, yeah.
Now, it seems surprising that Disney, who historically protect all elements of their company and their brand, etc. You know, your screenplay, you know, whilst not, as everyone's seen, while not making Disney out to be a monster or anything, you know, there's some booze, there's some cigarettes, there's some moments where he's not saintly. When it was going through the process of being acquired by Disney and the process up to and including production, how much pressure was there, or push to, you know, tweak, polish, engineer things differently?
None.
At all?
100% none. And I work at other studios, and so I know what that process is, and it happens everywhere and with everybody. They were brilliant. They loved that script. They really did, and they really protected it, and they were really clever and smart, and they realised that he's a human being just as PL is. He's flawed, and so is she, and so is everybody in that film. Human beings are. And at no point did they try to make me sanitize him. They really didn't. I honestly.
Yeah, he has a great monologue at the end, and I would imagine that probably wouldn't have had the power it had if he'd been kind of too sterile a character throughout.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to fight for that at all. There was no sense of.
No, I really didn't, and it was incredibly surprising. And I think that's a lot to do with. I think it's a lot to do with the people that were behind the desks and still are behind the desks at Disney at that time. They're all amazing people. Tendo really fought for us. We had a brilliant director, you know, who really, really loved and cherished that script. And I just feel like everybody kind of was like, no, this is it, let's just make this. And that's really unusual. It's really unusual for a studio. It's really unusual for the same writer to stay on throughout the process. But they were incredibly respectful to me, and incredibly respectful to the script. They had me on set every day. I honestly, I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful experience as a writer.
Of course, one of the advantages of Disney making the film is that it gives you immediate access to, well, the Disney lot and all the, you know, and all the amazing sort of scenes and offices we saw that frankly haven't changed much since then. But it also gave you access to things like, you know, it's a lovely touch at the end where we hear the real recording of Travis. I mean, when did you become aware that was available? And
I knew that they existed when I was writing the script, but obviously I didn't have any access to them because it wasn't a Disney film at that point. But once Disney acquired the script, they opened their archives to me, and were incredibly free with it. I could have looked at anything that I wanted to look at. They had some brilliant archivists who pulled stuff that was relevant to that period of time. And I was given I think is it 39 hours, Tendo? Of tape, 39 hours of tape, which is a nightmare to listen to. Honestly, I had such a headache at the end of it. She's awful. She's nice in this film compared to what she's like in real life. She's awful. And also they gave me access to Richard Sherman, who's one of the songwriters. And so that changed everything. We did do another draft of the script after that. Again, with no pushing or pulling from anybody, but just with the facts. which were really, really helpful. And the tape playing at the end of the film is all John Lee Hancock, our director, who's a genius. Like, that wasn't my idea, that was all him. He's brilliant.
You've hinted a bit at Travor's character in real life, and obviously both Walt Disney and her had rich, colourful existences, highs and lows, many of which are quite well known, have been publicised. So as a writer, when you sat down to write a film that is primarily a story of those two people that are kind of known and they're, how did you make the decisions that you made in terms of, I'm going to keep that in, I'm going to push that aside, we're not going to, you know, because there's a lot of backstory that there are hints bubbling under, but they're not strictly addressed. And I was wondering, for you, what was the sort of process you went through in deciding what to hone in on?
You know what? It was more a stripping away. It was really, really difficult because PL has these incredible colours in her life, and she also has a son called Camillus, who died about 4 months before we started shooting on the film, and he also died of alcoholism. So that was an enormous part of her life, and he was a twin, and she decided to adopt one twin and not the other. And there's this incredible story about Camillus where during this period of time his brother came to find him, and he found out that his biological parents had died 2 weeks prior, and that was in the script originally. And it was a really, really hard storyline to let go, because I couldn't let go of the fact that she had a father that died of alcoholism and a son that died of alcoholism, and that she had done this thing to this child. And she had lied to him all his life, telling him that his father was an Irish poet, so basically recreating Travers for her own son.
Right.
And that was felt like such an important part of her life, but actually it's not an important part of this story. So you'll hear lines in the film where Disney will say, "Do you have children?" And she'll like skirt around the issue, because obviously I can't say no, it's not true. Yeah. And so it was, those kind of things were very, very difficult to let go of. And Alison, being the brilliant producer that she is, was like, you have to let this go. And again, with Disney, you know, look, there's 1,000,001 stories about him, but this is 2 weeks of their lives, and you have to be brutal about that, and you have to say what happened in those 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And how did her past, which is the story we're really trying to tell, affect those 2 weeks? And it really isn't anything to do with her kid. That's a whole other film.
Talking of the past and how it affected her, the film has a lot of flashbacks in it. Now, most screenwriters are nervous about flashbacks.
I hate flashbacks.
They're a difficult thing to pull off.
Terrible. You should never use flashbacks.
But you dove into that well on numerous occasions. You know, how, in all seriousness, did you have any trepidation about that as a technique? Were you thinking, can I do it this way? Am I, you know?
I think I tried every other way, and there is no other way to do it. You have to use flashback in this film. But what I thought of it, when I was writing it, I tried to think of it as its own film. And in fact, John Lee was really brilliant in the way that he shot it. He shot it as 2 different films. So we shot Australia first as its own section, and then we shot Los Angeles as its own section. So we sort of made 2 films, and then John and Mark Lavolsi, the editor, kind of geniusly spliced them together. The flashbacks, it was really, really, really difficult, because you're trying to write 2 stories but make sure that this story is always speaking to this story, and that this story is always speaking to this story, but they're both moving forward the whole time. And what you're trying not to do is make them feel like 2 films. They have to feel like one. Yeah. So flashback is always, always really difficult. And you can use similar words on a page, you know, you can use words on the page in the flashback and then in the foreground, but how does John actually translate that to a visual that we can all see? And so I have to say that the flashbacks in this film work because of John Lee.
Which brings me on to my next question, which is to ask about your writing process, because what you just described sounds very complicated.
Yeah.
As if, you know, writing isn't tortuous enough anyway. Are you a person that's very, what is your process? Do you work quite rigidly to a structure? Do you work out all the beats? How do you start when you're writing a screenplay?
I sit and stare at a blank computer screen until my forehead starts to bleed, and then I cry. And then I go, I can't do it, I'm terrible, I'm such a bad writer. And I do that for a few weeks. Then I go to therapy. No, I don't have a process. I don't outline, which is horrifying to most writers. I just start on page one, and then I kind of let the story take me where it wants to take me. I do an enormous amount of research, and so I kind of know how I'm going to find my way through it, and I know what the beginning is and the end is, but I sort of have no idea how I'm going to get from A to B.
You're not ticking off page 26, inciting moment, none of that?
No.
You're not? Okay.
No, I just sort of feel my way through it. I am starting to cave to the idea that I might have to write outlines, because what I end up with is like a 200-page draft that's just shit, and then I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, this is an enormous amount of vomit on a page, and now I have to make something from it. And so then I'll pull like balloons down from the ceiling and bits out of the script, but don't listen to me. That is not the way to write a script. It's terrible, it's torturous, and you'll end up wanting to kill yourself.
Oh, well, one thing the process does bring up, apart from suicide attempts, is this film's a good example of it. There's a lot of great secondary characters in this film. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, pretty much all the characters are secondary apart from our lead two, and they're all great. I mean, I know they're all played by great actors, but a lot of that is the writing. These characters seem to have been given a lot of love. Are you one of those writers who's a big fan of your secondary characters?
Yeah, massive fan of my secondary characters, and in fact, part of my process is that I will go through the draft for each character as well. So there's no one that gets left. I will do a Ralph pass, and I will do a Don DeGrady pass, and a Richard pass, and a Bob pass, so that I make sure that everybody's journey is track. And I think that's really important. They are, whilst Walt and PL are the axis, these guys spin on that axis, and it's really, they're very, very important to the central storyline. It doesn't work without them. So yeah, they're really important. And all of those characters, I was very, very lucky, because all of those characters really existed apart from Ralph, who is an invention.
So it sounds, I almost dread to ask it, but it sounds such a tortuous, complicated process. How long does it take you to write a screenplay?
Do you know what? They all take different amounts of time. This one, surprisingly, only took 3 months from beginning to end. And the script that is on the screen, we did one more pass after the archives were open to me, but pretty much that is the script that is on the screen. And that's not normally the case. Most other scripts will go through many, 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 many passes, but this one took 3 months. That first draft is the draft that was on the blacklist, is the draft that Disney bought, and then we did another pass and a John Lee pass, but really kind of, a big pass with the tapes and Richard Sherman and all of that kind of stuff, and then a very kind of minimal pass with John, and that's it. So this one, it's kind of unheard of for that to happen.
Like the movie, let's flash back a little now. Before
do we have to?
We have to. I'm sorry.
Oh God.
The backstory is so crucial.
It's like this is your life.
So before, having done copious research on Wikipedia for about 10 minutes before this chat,
right. I'm
aware that before you started writing, you did have a spell as an actress.
That's not true.
No, it says it on the internet. So
the internet's lying.
You did all the greats, the Bill and Holby City.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. But my question is,
tell them it's not true, Tommy.
So my question is, did you acted for a bit? You decided that wasn't for you.
Yeah. Hated it.
And you went into writing.
Yeah.
Did the acting experience colour, help, shape you as a writer?
Yeah, definitely. It really did. I had to say so many unsayable lines doing The Bill and Holby City. They're great shows. My sister's in Holby City. But it really taught me about dialogue and about making sure that, you know, things can sound really brilliant and wordy on a page, but then become completely unsayable when you put them in somebody's mouth. So that was a big learning curve for me. And then also, as an actor, I never really knew what to do with my physicality. I felt like my hands and my legs were just these big flapping things the whole time. So I very much tried to give a physicality to each character. So with Pamela, for example, her feet are always together, her hands are always in her lap, and often she's looking at the sky. And I think that's a really important thing to give to an actor as well.
Okay, so now obviously it seems from the outside that there was a sort of meteoric sort of, you started writing and then you were sort of bang, 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 saying lots of things, but presumably it wasn't quite that straightforward.
Yeah, it totally happened in 24 hours.
Yeah. How long were you writing before anyone showed an interest in buying something that you'd written?
About 10 years.
Okay. And what was the first sniff of sort of excitement about something you'd produced?
It was a UK version of Debbie Does Dallas, the musical.
Right.
So the porn film with songs.
I didn't know there was a musical version of that film.
There is.
Oh, okay.
I wrote it.
Excellent.
And it went to the Edinburgh Festival and did really well and got amazing reviews and won some awards. And that was the first thing that got me any attention. And then I met Tom Hardy, and then we started to write together. We sold a couple of pilots, and then he went off to do a movie called Bronson, and that ran into trouble. And so I went on to rewrite Bronson on set while they were doing that, and people sort of knew I did that, and then that opened up America for me.
Okay.
And Tom.
And yeah, I mean, he's done quite well, hasn't he?
He's doing all right.
Yeah. So you did the rewriting on Bronson, and then you created Terra Nova.
I did.
Which, you know, as legend would have it, basically you came up with this idea and Steven Spielberg was straight on the phone, kind of, I want it. I mean...
Pretty much.
So, can you tell us a little bit... I'm guessing that Terra Nova was not similar to the other things you'd been writing before. I'm guessing you didn't do a lot of sci-fi and that kind of thing.
So, and I never will again.
So can you just briefly explain what prompted you to suddenly go, you know what, I'm going to try and create some sort of sci-fi, maybe with dinosaurs?
My dad. My dad only watches sci-fi. He's a massive Star Trek fan. So I'd be like, here, Dad, look at this script I've written about people on death row. It's really deep. And he'd be like, yeah, I don't get it. Where's the flying spaceship? And
Seems
it's a valid question. Yeah. Where is the flying spaceship? Oh yeah, that'll fix it. And so I basically just wanted to write something that I thought he would like. And I wrote this 15-page outline, gave it to him, and that was it. Like it wasn't something I was passionate about or that I loved, but he was like, this is the best thing I've ever read. And I was like, great, job done. And then I got a new agent, and she just said, give me everything that you've got, every outline you've ever written, every script you've ever written. And that was the one that she decided to pull out. I was like, but what about the death row one? And she was like, oh, brilliant, the time travel show. And I was like, no, I really don't love that. And before I knew it, there was like American agents and managers and like crazy people from big companies calling up saying, you got to come over to Hollywood and pitch it. And I was working in a video shop at the time.
Right.
And opposite the pub we used to drink in.
The Latchmere.
Yes. And I was like, oh, what? And so I like scraped together some video shop money and went and stayed in like this cockroach-ridden place in Burbank. And then weirdly, I was just suddenly in front of networks pitching this dinosaur show, but it didn't have dinosaurs in it. It didn't have dinosaurs in it when I created it. And then it got into a bidding war, and I didn't know what any of that meant. And then it got sold in the first week. And then in the second week, I sold the Death Row show too. And then Yeah, basically Steven, I wrote the pilot, Steven Spielberg, I got a phone call saying Steven Spielberg's reading it. I was like, oh, shut up. And then he said, I want to produce it. And then the network said, well, we'll just go straight to series then, because it's Steven Spielberg.
You didn't even have to make a pilot.
Didn't even have to make a pilot, which is, looking back, I'm like, oh my God, that's never, ever, ever happens. At the time, I had no idea what happens. So I was like, okay. And then Steven said, I'm going to fill it with dinosaurs. And I was like, oh no, that's not, no. It's supposed to be like Blade Runner.
You can't really argue with Steven Spielberg.
Can't argue with Steven Spielberg, so I left and quit. And my dad was crying. My dad was like, oh my God, what are you doing? You can't quit. And I did, and I went back to work.
Didn't they offer you an enormous amount of money to be involved?
They did. For some reason, they don't understand no here. So they go, oh, more money.
Yeah.
And
But
you go,
just
no,
I
just...
negotiation starts.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I just really don't want to do it. And they were like, more money. And my dad was going, oh my God, you can retire. But I knew that if I wrote it, I probably wouldn't write again, because I would have been doing it for the money.
Yeah.
And so whilst it was an amazing offer, I decided to go back and work in the video store.
It's amazing.
While Steven Spielberg made my show.
But you could at least watch Steven Spielberg movies in the video store.
I could.
So,
I could, the good ones.
Yeah. That must have, obviously things have worked out since, but there must have been some moments back in the video store where you questioned whether you'd made the right decision.
I was throwing up in the back going, what have I done? I'm earning £6.50 an hour. No, I never questioned it. I really never questioned it. And it was during that period that Saving Mr. Banks came along. So it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Yeah. But I knew I wouldn't write again if I wrote that show. I could have been on it for 3 years. I could still be on it today if I'd signed that contract. The idea of that is just horrendous. And anyway, we all know what happened to Terra Nova. Didn't work out very well.
Maybe it wouldn't have been cancelled if you'd been on it though. So
because I knew everything about dinosaurs, and I would have done it geniusly. No, it would have been awful. It would have been even worse.
The Death Row show you mentioned, is that Westbridge?
That's Westbridge, yeah.
Westbridge. Now, is that still, because that was brought up by Showtime?
It
I
was.
think. Is that still? Could that emerge at some point?
We're making it next year.
It's definitely going.
My
ahead.
lovely BBC jumped in and bought it off Showtime. And now we're making it.
Oh, that's exciting.
So it's really exciting, yeah.
And are you going to be writing a lot of that?
Yeah, I'm a control freak, so all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you going to fit that in? Because again, from my copious 5 minutes on the internet, it says that you are currently writing Mr. Chartwell about Winston Churchill's depression manifesting itself as a large dog.
Yeah.
The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Okay. A working title film called Reunion.
No.
That's gone.
No, Little Mermaid replaced that.
A Ben Stiller film.
Done.
A couple of
Never will see the light of day.
A couple of TV shows.
One.
Okay. Well, that's by my count, that's still at least 5 projects.
What about the sex film?
I'm getting to it. But I know you've already written that. But it seems like you've got about 5 things on the go right now.
Little Mermaid is done.
Okay.
And our director may be doing a different film, so there may be a change in director on that. Okay. You know, all of these things kind of come and go. So Little Mermaid is finished. And so whilst that's in its hiatus, I can finish Mr. Chartwell, which is nearly done. And then at the same time as doing that, I'm working with Tommy Shlamy on how we do Westbridge. We're only going to do Westbridge as an 8-part series, so that's doable.
8 1 hours?
8 1 hours, yeah. And then what are the other things I'm doing?
Oh, God knows. Reunion?
No,
no, that's not happening.
Dead.
I've lost.
And the Stiller thing was written
done.
like 2 years ago.
Okay, there isn't another TV show that I've missed out?
There isn't another TV show that you've missed out.
Let's get to the sex then.
Okay.
All right, so how to put this politely, 50 Shades of Grey is notorious in lots of ways.
Yeah.
But one thing that not a lot of people have said about it is that it's the greatest written novel of all time.
Right.
So did you have any concerns going in that it was going to be tricky to turn that story into a credible film?
No.
Okay, great, good.
And that's the end of that. No, it's I love things that are character driven, and it has two really fascinating characters at the centre of it, Christian and Anna, and that's what drew me to it. I think I would have concerns if you asked me to go and adapt a David Foster Wallace novel, because you can't make that better, because he's a genius. So that's that. You know, you're done. You're only going to get killed for it. But with 50 Shades, I think I could see a way to make a good film out of it, a nice film, a beautiful film, because these characters, no matter how you think that book is written, do have a depth. And their story is really, really interesting. And it doesn't have a happy ending. It's a tragedy. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful, the story.
All right. Sex, though, is tricky.
Yeah,
it's
and
tricky.
I'm a virgin,
yeah.
so...
I'd heard that word on the street. So, but sex is tricky. Lots of good writers have written bad sex and been ridiculed for it. And movie sex can be difficult. I mean, there must have been a part of you... bold though you are and confident though you are, that was thinking, there are pitfalls, there are potential pitfalls in doing a film with a lot of sex in it, I would have thought. No?
I mean,
there are no pitfalls. It's all going to be...
I don't know. Have you seen Fatal Attraction? Have you seen 9.5 Weeks? I mean, they're great films. I think they're great films. Don't you roll your eyes at me. They are great films.
I think Fatal Attraction's good.
I love 9.5 Weeks. It makes me cry. I love it.
Okay.
I don't know. The book is what it is, and the film is going to be what it is. I don't think there are any pitfalls to it as long as you do it right. Obviously, you couldn't put all of the stuff that was in the book in it, so I chose 5 and put them in.
5 sex scenes?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
We're talking about a Disney film.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be talking about a Disney film.
I know, but now we started on sex. It's tricky. Okay, a more pertinent perhaps question is, especially for writers and aspiring writers, there were a number of writers attached potentially to 50 Shades of Grey, and I'm guessing that you were not the only writer that the producers took a meeting with,
right,
and said, tell us your vision for 50 Shades of Grey. So presumably, well, obviously, your vision was the one that they liked the most, that they believed had. So can you give us some tips here on,
David!
Give us some tips on how you pitch,
I didn't. I turned it down 20 times.
Okay.
And they don't like no. Like I said.
Do they give you lots of money again? This is a recurring
thing. David!
Yeah.
No, David's my agent. Look, I said no to it, and I said no to it because I was on the set for Saving Mr. Banks, and I didn't have time to work up a pitch, and Saving Mr. Banks was my baby and my film, and John Lee needed me there, and the cast needed me there, and so I wasn't about to leave them and go and start taking meetings on another movie. And so I said no, and I said no, and I said no, and I said no, and no, and then they kept coming back, and they met with, I think, 4 other writers who did work up pitches, and I just kept saying, look, I can't give you a pitch, I can't break this book down for you because I don't have time and I'm on my film, so I will happily come. They wanted me to meet with everybody separately, and I said I couldn't, but that I would meet everybody in one room at one time and happily have a coffee with the author, but that I couldn't tell them, I could tell them what I thought of the book, but that I couldn't do a pitch for them. And I took that one meeting and I didn't pitch anything. I did show E.L. James a picture of Colin Farrell with his top off, and that seemed to get me the job.
Wow.
So that was that.
That's the secret of that.
Yeah, just say no.
Shall we open it up and see if anyone's got some slightly smarter questions than me, which is a given, I think.
I thought they were great.
Anyone got a question for Kelly?
All Giamatti's amazing, but if that's the only character that you created out of your own imagination, Ralph was a superb character, and so beautifully. I mean, that scene with them at the airport, when she says, "You're the only American I've really ever liked," and when he shows up, it's an incredibly moving aspect of the film.
Thank you. He's my favourite. He's my favourite.
Yeah,
I love him.
I was
He's
going
my...
to say it to you right here.
Oh, Thank you so much. I love him. He's my baby, and he, interestingly, was a really, really late addition to the script. So he arrived about a week and a half before I finished the draft. The draft just wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out why. And I couldn't figure out why I still didn't like her. And that's when he got created. He flew in through the window, and kind of saved the script, really. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, over.
So you've moved from the UK to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Was that for to be closer to the industry you're writing in? Was it for a change of scenery? How does that affect your creative process?
I don't have a shed at the bottom of a garden anymore, but I've got a really nice pool. I moved here because I was spending, all of my projects were based over here, so I was coming back and forth like 12 times a year, and it was getting insane, and I was feeling like really baseless, and that I didn't, that nowhere was home. It started to be that the only reason that I was going back to London was kind of to be near family and friends, but not really for work. And then I had to come and be on the set of Saving Mr. Banks, and I was in pre-production and post as well. So that was a good 6 months of my life. And at that point, I just felt like I sort of fell in love with LA. I really like LA. I think it's a great place to live. Like, who doesn't want to wake up to the sun every day when you've been in drizzly London? And so it wasn't really a work decision, but more if that I just was here all the time, and there wasn't anything keeping me in London anymore.
Any more? For any more?
How much do you interact with the actors in regards to changing lines?
That's a really good question. On this particular film, a lot. So we did a 2-week rehearsal period where anybody could kind of say what they wanted to say about their character, if they wanted to change lines, which pretty much nobody did. That they had that opportunity within the rehearsal period. We also had Dick Sherman with us a lot, so he would spend a lot of time kind of helping people, sort of helping me a lot, saying, I wouldn't say this, but Bob would, or Walt would speak like this. The only actor that I did a pass with for his character specifically was Tom Hanks. And that's because Tom is an avid researcher, and he, having spent many, many hours watching Walt tapes and interviews, recognized that Walt says and things and things and things all the time. So he'd be talking to you now and go, oh, I'm talking about this and things, and Aubrey and things. And so we did an and things pass together and just found places where we could put that in. Everybody else, and that's the only thing Tom changed. Everybody else was a slave to the text, particularly Emma Thompson, who's a writer herself. So she was like, it was just word for word the script, apart from one line that she made up, which I love, and that's poor A.A. Milne when she picks up the Winnie the Pooh and puts it in the cupboard. But I don't normally tell people like that because I like to take credit for it myself.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
So did you have anyone in mind to play Travers? Because Emma Thompson was just spot on.
Yeah. We not while I was writing it. When I write, I put up pictures of the characters around my computer. So I was very lucky. Normally, I'll find pictures of people I think my characters look like. I was really lucky in this circumstance that they all existed. So I could have pictures of P.L. Travers and Walt Disney and the Shermans. So not whilst writing it. And then when Alison and I sat down with, prior to John Lee coming on board, but also when John Lee came on board, there was a list of 2 people for Walt and PL, and they were Emma Thompson and Tom Hanks. And we never, ever thought of anybody else. So it was really terrifying going out to those 2 actors, because we were like, what do we do if we can't get them? And a really beautiful and incredible thing about this film is that we got every actor that was the first person we thought of in the cast. So nobody ever said no. It was Colin, Ruth. Ruth got cast in an elevator in the 4 seasons. I mean, just everybody that we wanted, we got.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.